of rights or the Charter of freedoms, and you'll find it's still making that noise. Yeah. Surely. Yeah, of course. طيب الله المستعان. Yes, all right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Today, inshallah ta'ala, the third episode of Reduced Concepts. We'll be talking about freedom, knowledge, and jihad. And they're a bit generic in terms of as values or concepts. They're not necessarily or specifically Islamic. The majority of this series until the end of it will be touching base on Islamic specific values that I think are reduced. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a glimpse or at least talk about a few topics that I think are worthy of our analysis, that are generic, that are part of the world around us in general. It gives you, inshallah, a methodology or a way to do that within your life about or regarding topics that you may take as important in your own life, or you see as were important in the way that you grew up or what you thought was valuable, for you to be able to reassess and analyze. And I think the example of intentions in our deen is a good way to kind of walk into this, because understanding intentions in Islam requires an ongoing process of renewal and tasheeh. You're always kind of correcting. You have to go back, because they can get rusty and they can lose their essence and substance, because it's just how we are as human beings. We lack that ability to sometimes to focus and to remind ourselves exactly why we're doing what we're doing. So when we talk about freedom specifically, when we talk about freedom here in the West, freedom is the cornerstone of the Western civilization. It started in Europe and it moved its way over to the Western countries, and liberty became the #1 topic that everyone looks into, or talks about, or wants to defend and wants to protect. And I don't blame them, and I don't think it's something that is negative in any form or manner, actually. And I'll, at the end of talking about it, I will touch base on what the Islamic view is of the concept of freedom and where and how we're supposed to look at it. But the example I'm trying to give through freedom is the Western civilization was built on this extremely profound value of liberty. And then I think it's not difficult for us to see what has come of liberty today. Like, is liberty or freedom, which as a concept that this whole civilization was built upon, is it the same today? Does it function in the same way? Do people view it in the same way? Do they practice it in the same way? Or has it lost value over time? Has it lost substance and essence over time? I think it's safe to say that almost everyone living in the West knows that the concept of liberty and freedom has lost a certain degree of its substance just over the course of time. And I think that as people living in the West, unless we renew this concept, unless we get rid of the reduction that has occurred upon this value, then as a society, as a country, we're going to suffer because of that. Like, I don't think we can afford not to go back and renew our understanding of what freedom actually is. So the question that I pose here is it just hate speech? Is the freedom of speech, or the freedom of expression, is it reduced just to being able to say things that are extremely offensive, and extremely harmful and hurtful to large groups of people? Is freedom of speech or freedom of expression or freedom of press just the freedom of saying things or taking something that is holy or sacred to a group of people and offending it or disrespecting it or talking about it in a way that lacks any form of decency? Is freedom or are personal liberties, are they means, are they excuses for us to disregard the well-being of the collective or of the group? These are questions that I think we should be asking ourselves. And there's a lot for us to look at that. I want you to take this quote of Chomsky. This is a really important quote that he put out around a decade ago. He actually said this one of his books. He said, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion." It's a smart way to do it. But allow very lively debate within that spectrum. Even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives people the sense that there's freedom of thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate. So this may be a little bit complicated, but really what he's saying is that if you want to control people, you want to do it in an intelligent way where people don't even notice that they're being controlled, you just make sure that you limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion. You just put limitations. And then you encourage and you engage in a lot of debate and a lot of discussion and conversation within that spectrum, right? And you encourage people who are opposing one another and you support them, just as long as they say within the limitations that you have already put. As long as those presuppositions are set And if you do that long enough, people will start to believe that those limitations are actually real, that they're sacred, that they're holy, that you can't think outside of them. And that's basically what we're seeing here today. That's what's happening in the West. Now, in the Middle East, they don't put themselves to the trouble of doing this. They just don't allow you to think. And if you try and think, then they make it very clear to you not to do it again. And they do it belligerently and very openly and just in a dictatorship fashion. They don't put themselves through this trouble. This here is the same thing. It's just happening in a much more, there's more finesse to it. It's just a little bit more sneaky and flashy, and people don't notice it as much. So when I came here, this is what I found out to be the issue, that there's really no freedom of speech here. It's just that the spectrum is a little bit wider. That's all. But freedom as a value, and this is what we're going to discuss over the course of these days, is that values are only values if they're consistent. If they're not consistent, they're not values. They don't mean anything. If there's exceptions to these things, if there's exceptions, then it's not really real. Like, there's no liberty if there is one thing, just one thing, that you're not allowed to question or talk about. One thing. There's an infinite number of things. If just one of them is you're not allowed to think about this or talk about this or discuss it, then there's no liberty. There's no freedom. There's no difference between one thing, not being able to talk about one thing, versus not being able to talk about anything but one thing. Right? There's no difference between the two. They're equally problematic. They just don't present the negative that comes from it. The consequences of that just presents itself at different times in history. That's all. Just maybe when you limit it, even when you severely limit freedom, maybe you see the negative impact of that a bit quicker than you will when you have the spectrum a little bit wider. But freedom is not freedom unless you have the ability to discuss and talk about absolutely everything. When you think about his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, when you think about his da'wah was based on the premise of خَلُّوا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. This is what he was arguing with Quraysh the whole time. Just let me speak to people. Don't limit my right to speak about what I want to speak about. Like, I want to explain things to them. If they accept it, they accept it. If they refuse it and reject it, they can refuse it and reject it. Islam, there's no space in it for people to be coerced into accepting a religion. It's insane to even imagine that. But the Prophet ﷺ's problem was that the Quraysh were not allowing him to speak. That he didn't have the liberty to be Muslim, and people didn't have the liberty to accept Islam, and he did not have the freedom to go and speak to people openly. He had to do it under the radar at all times, or else he was going to be persecuted and oppressed, and people would be, their lives would be threatened. So this problem here is real here in the West. We're allowed to talk about certain things. You can go ahead and you can speak out against the politicians who represent you, right? For us, it's refreshing. For people coming from the Middle East, it's refreshing because you can't do that. You ever heard the joke where a Western politician is speaking, or Western leader is speaking to an Eastern leader? So the Western leader is trying to preach democracy, or their version of it, to an Eastern leader. So you're telling him, my people can walk in the street and openly curse me, and no one will speak to them. No one will harm them. So the Eastern leader said, yeah, the same thing. My people can walk in the street and curse you out openly, and no one will speak to them. No one will harm them either. They can curse you in my country too. So we came and found that was the case. But politically, you can speak out a lot. But then you start figuring out that there are certain topics that if you do speak about, then the outcome is not the same. And maybe you're not going to be taken by an intelligence agency, but there are other ways for you to know that this is not this is territory that you're not welcome to discuss upon. So where do individual liberties end? This is what I want to talk about when we talk about freedoms and liberties. Is there a limit to individual liberties? Or are they open for you to do anything, absolutely anything that you want? And I think that's something that the emphasis upon it at this time and in this country and in this part of the world has become a little bit confusing for people. There's a lot of emphasis on individual liberties, and the priority of the individual liberty has trumped everything. Everything else is nothing can hold a candle to the concept of individual liberty, regardless of what the consequences are, regardless of whether there is indirect harm from that individual liberty, regardless of whether the well-being or the best interest of the collective is being compromised by that individual liberty or not. And that, in my opinion, is a problem. Because one of the basic laws or rules that societies are built upon, not just an Islamic society, but societies in general, is do no harm, or la darara wa la dirar. You're not allowed to afflict harm upon yourself, and you're definitely not allowed to afflict harm upon others. But then the problem becomes, how do you define harm? And this is where this issue becomes a little bit more tricky and difficult to talk about. How do you define harm? Now, individual liberties, the way that they're designed and the way that people look at them here today is that they completely ignore any form of long-term harm or indirect harm. Like they're only willing to identify or acknowledge or recognize harm that is direct. Meaning, I mean, my individual liberty ends when I'm starting to punch you or take away your wealth or threaten your life. That's where my individual liberty ends. But if I do something that will lead to the loss of your life, right, maybe a couple of years down the road, or in an indirect manner, that is not identified. Like it's not the time to take in to actually look or analyze that is much weaker. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all. No, these arguments amongst lawmakers exist, but it's not as well emphasized. And really, I'm not interested in what the lawmakers are talking about or what's happening in courts of law. What I'm interested in is the mentality of the human being. If the human being does not recognize that their actions have to be assessed to make sure that they're not causing harm, not just directly and short term, but indirectly and long term, then we're in a dilemma. We're in a real dilemma in the world in terms of how we define our own liberties. So how do we distinguish, for example, hate speech from freedom of speech? That First Amendment, as they say, right for you to speak your mind. Well, how do you distinguish that from hate speech, where you're saying things that are discriminatory, or things that are racist, or that are putting people down? This is actually a very thin line, and it requires a lot of intelligence and a lot of reflection. As Muslims, we absolutely do not accept any form of hate speech. This is a part of our deen, actually. And if you study any aspect of tazkiyah and you attend tazkiyah groups, then you know that one of the first things you learn is that you're not allowed to forget about saying things that are harmful to others. You're not allowed to think things that are harmful towards others. Like you're not allowed to even carry it in your sir, within your mind. Because if you do, then that's an aspect of bad assumptions, that's an aspect of arrogance that you have, and you're not allowed to do that. Forget about actually expressing it openly and carrying it as an opinion towards other people. You're not even allowed to carry it on the inside. Actually, Islam is the bulk of the work of the Quran is to focus on how you're going to get rid of that from the inside of you, which is why I think is worthy of contemplation. When we talk about freedoms in the West, and we talk about what hate speech is, it kind of seems that we've reduced this beautiful concept of freedom that ensures that as individuals we will be able to govern ourselves, we'll be able to speak out for ourselves, we will not be enslaved again, whether financially or socially or both. But then we reduce it to just wanting to say hateful things. And then when someone comes up, or when it's pointed out to you that was racist, or that was disrespectful, that was harmful to people, and there was no benefit, there's no gain in it, and you're not actually critiquing an idea of any sort. It's one thing to critique an idea. If I have an idea and I stand by it, and you critique it, like if you come here and critique my religion, that's not racist. I'm sorry, it's not racist if someone doesn't like Islam and he speaks out against Islam. I know it's not pleasant for you or me, but it's not racist. Because it's an idea. You can go ahead and you can speak as much as you want about an idea that you don't like. We actually welcome it as Muslims. Go ahead, make your points, make your arguments, because we have a better one. We'll just have a counter one that will make more sense and actually work in our advantage. Like if you go ahead and you speak out against a strong idea, you give us reason to rebuttal, and that rebuttal actually will be more powerful, so it will mean more in the long run, and people actually be closer to Islam than farther away because of the fact that you're making these statements. It's when you speak out against Muslims, for example, specifically. Not about the practices. Again, you're not focused on the practice, but you're bulking them as a group of people, and you're giving them a specific stereotype, and you're belittling them because of that stereotype. That's different. When you take a character within Islam, someone who's meaningful, someone who is seen with a certain degree of sanctity, and you mock them. See, mockery is not critique. Mockery is not critique. If I don't like a leader of some sort, if I don't like a religious figure of some sort, then I have the right to point out what I think is wrong, what I think is problematic. I don't have the right to mock. Mockery is not an academic approach of freedom. Like it's not a form of freedom of speech or critiquing or criticizing or scrutinizing something that you think is problematic. Mockery is a whole different, which is basically what we reduce this to. Our freedom is just the freedom to mock and to make fun of things and to get laughs off someone else's sacred or holy figure or holy idea. And many of you remember maybe back in 2006 and then 2007 and the caricatures that emerged from parts of Europe, and even that would depict the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and it caused a lot of uprise and anger within the Muslim world. I look at this, and the reason I'm talking about freedom, because I want to look at this from both perspectives. I don't agree with this expression of opinion in a form of mockery. I don't think it's smart. I don't think it actually is what freedom is about. If I don't like Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, if I don't like a religion, I think there's something wrong with it. For me to take the path of mockery, to take something that they think is sacred and make fun of it, which serves no purpose, it does not actually get them to rethink their faith. It does not put them in a position where they have to now critically or logically go through the points that I've made, but rather just feel extremely offended and feel hurt that they now are marginalized or targeted, or they are the laughing stock of a group. It doesn't work very well. Now, the response Muslims had was worse. Our response was worse. Our response was that you don't have the right to say anything about Islam or about the Prophet, and that's not true. They have the right to say whatever they want. They have the right to express their opinions about him. They have the right to express the opinions about our deen, and they should. And if we don't have a strong idea, we should not be holding on to it. Freedom is very important, because if you limit freedom, then people will be stuck with a lousy idea for a very long time, because there's no freedom of actually critiquing it. So not only do we think it's okay for people to speak against Islam, we actually encourage it. Go ahead, bring it on. Because our idea is superior, not because it's my idea or your idea, because it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word. So we have complete confidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's teaching is superior to anyone else's argument. So bring it on. Because if you do, then we can respond, and then actually this argument becomes meaningful, becomes fruitful, and the person who is listening will actually figure out who has the stronger and superior argument, and then you actually bring people to Islam more. So we're not against anyone critiquing. This is a problem. Muslims for a while, they look, no, you don't have the right. No, you have the right to speak about whatever you want. You can point out that mockery is not a very civilized manner of doing it. But to go break things and to try and kill people, and for that to be embedded somewhere in the Islamic mind is problematic. Because that's not, we don't understand liberty. We don't accept that. We don't limit liberties as Muslims at all. We refuse any form of coercion. I'm trying to make, I know this is a little bit difficult. Not everyone will agree with this, but I think it's important for you to contemplate. Because for a long time, even from an Islamic perspective, you've been led to believe a little bit that no, people don't have the right to say this or don't have the right to do that. No, they do. People have the right to express their opinions, whatever their opinions may be. It's not a problem. The Prophet ﷺ invited these things. He would go, give me. Hatu burhanakum. Bring it on. Explain what's wrong about this, so I can argue back with you. But to make something, no, you cannot speak out against this. As a Muslim, you can't point out that maybe was wrong. You can't point out that maybe our history has some serious flaws, and there's some actual harm that was done by Muslims. You can't say that. You can't speak about specific figures that maybe they made mistakes. And if you say the word mistake, then suddenly you're no longer a Sunni Muslim anymore, and now you're going to be called something else, or you're going to be removed from the millah. Why? Based on what? You're limiting freedom of thought and freedom of expression. That doesn't serve anything in the long run. What that does is that after a while, it just people start to feel repelled, and they start ignoring Islam, and they walk away from it. Because any idea that is not open to critique is an idea that is scared and afraid and weak. That's the end. And is that Islam? No. And nothing in Islam is like that. So there should be no problem of people expressing and speaking and having their opinions. I believe that tyranny in this country exists, or in this part of the world, as just as bad as it exists in the Middle East. I don't think there's any difference at all. I think it just comes in a different package. I think it's a prettier package, as most things here are. They're prettier packages. You go buy food. It comes in a nice little box, it's colored. And in Syria, they give it to you in a jaraid, in a newspaper. Here, you eat your sandwich. But it's the same thing. It's just the packaging is a little bit more fancy here. You know how to package stuff. But the tyranny is the same. The concept of cancel culture that has become a prevalent word. Like, it's a word that now exists in within the realms that we live in, and it's no longer something that's understood. It's very clear. The concept of cancel culture, where someone can have an opinion, again, outside of those limitations that Shamsi was talking about, outside of those presuppositions that were put there. You speak something outside of that, and then you can be removed. You can lose your job. You can have your reputation ruined. You can lose your relationships. You can lose your status. And that's basically all that the human being works towards. How is that different than you're being thrown into a cell? At least in a cell, when you're thrown there, you still have your integrity and dignity. Your reputation still stands. Like someone who speaks out against the government in the Middle East and then disappears or is thrown in jail, at least they can, their legacy and their reputation stays something that's respectful. In the West, no, they don't put you in jail. Just make sure that they smear your name, that they just drag your name in the mud for a while so that you can't show your face anywhere. And you don't have the ability to express yourself properly anymore, and you're not taken seriously in what you say. How is that any different? I don't see that to be any different. That's exactly what we're going through right now. The concept of canceling people because they have an opinion outside of the acceptable range of, or acceptable, the range of acceptable opinion. And remember when 170 days ago, just after October 7th, and then for 3 or 4 days afterwards, they just bombed like crazy. And we went from like 0 deaths to maybe like 3,000 within the course of just a few days, which was a huge, we had never seen that amount of death within just the course of a few days. And when we were talking about that look, all these people are civilians, but you're killing civilians. You're not actually killing the fighters or the resistance. You're actually taking out women and children in their homes, and it was not even coming through media outlets. It was people just holding up phones and showing. I'm not sure if you're watching, if you're keeping up anymore, if you're able to. But the images that are emerging from neighborhoods in Gaza is just. The last time I saw destruction that bad was in cities in Syria back in 2012 and 13 and 14, when the regime bombed and destroyed complete regions just to silence to silence the resistance. And when we tried to talk out against it, all you got was the questioning. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn? And because they just wanted to see if maybe you'll say something outside of the range of acceptable opinion. They just want you to say something outside because then they can counsel you. Then whatever you say afterwards doesn't matter. Like if you have an amazing argument, but you say if you refuse to condemn openly, then khalas. Now you've said something outside of the range of acceptable opinion, and now you can be cancelled. And anything that you have to say or any opinion that you carry now can be completely ignored and neglected. Doesn't matter anymore because of that person. They're an open supporter of. They're an open supporter. They're an open supporter. So they're an open supporter. Their argument doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter anymore. How is that possible? How if someone has two opinions, one that's good and one that's bad, the bad one will cancel this good one. That's how we're going to think about things. Imagine if we did that in science. Imagine if we did that in science. If a scientist had a good opinion and bad opinions, and the bad opinions can cancel their good ones, or their bad research cancels out their good research. That's not how this works. But this is what we're dealing with today. So when we talk about liberty, because we've accepted the reduction of this value, just to the ability to mock, to have satire, to have late night shows. There's 6 late night shows now you can watch it, where they just mock politicians. You can do that. We've accepted that this value is going to be reduced, just the ability to mock politicians and to protest and carry hate speech based, and then walk and then undress yourself and walk however you want on the street and put out whatever obscene material online, no problem. If we've accepted the reduction, so now what we're dealing with is this. We're dealing with this. We don't have the ability now to speak our minds. You don't have the ability to have an opinion on certain things. You know that. When the poster came out in Western a year and a half ago, remember that? That was a time. That was a fun time, wasn't it? That was fun. When that poster came out, we figured out. Everyone was like, "Well, who's going to say something? No one's going to say anything. Why would they say? Why would anyone say anything? Why would you come out publicly and speak out against? Why? Why would you do something that is going to literally end your life right then and there, and everyone is going to sit down and watch? No one's going to do it. Of course, they're not going to do it because we don't have a community set up to allow us to protect. We don't have a setup to protect our liberties. We're living in a time where your liberties outside of a certain range are not protected, and we don't have a communal setup to actually protect people who want to question some of those limitations. We don't have it. So you have to dance around the topic, and you have to be very careful. How are you going to address it? When you didn't have to, really, you don't really have to. From a logical perspective, their arguments make no sense at all. But it's no longer an issue of logic anymore. Like when you're arguing, we're going to talk about like gender identity later on in this course or in this series. But when you talk about these things, logically or scientifically or psychologically, there's no basis for the majority of these arguments, almost at all. Like logically, it makes no sense the way what they're saying. It doesn't make sense biologically. Doesn't make sense socially. Doesn't make sense psychologically. But that doesn't matter. because they were able to limit the liberties regarding addressing or criticizing the actual topic. That's smart. I have to say, touche. No, that's a smart way of doing it, because you don't have an argument at all. Just take the spectrum and just shrink it a little bit and put it outside the spectrum. So the moment you open your mouth, no one's interested in hearing what you're trying to explain. Like, yeah, I want to. No, that exists for a lot of things. If someone wants to talk about healthcare, huh? If you open your mouth and start saying maybe the system that we have here is not going to work. Maybe it's going to crumble under its own weight at some point in the near future, and then people will die. A lot of people will die. Maybe we don't wait for that. Maybe we start talking about having a two-tier system. You say that, and immediately you are removed. You're removed. Now this is a far-right person, because that's outside of the spectrum of proper or appropriate or acceptable opinion. At least in certain realms they are, politically, and in the healthcare world, you can't talk about this stuff. You can't come out and say these things. It's a problem that we are living in a time where you want to offer opinion. I don't care about the politics. I'm not trying to say that someone's. Just listen to what. Nope. The moment you say that it's not going to be fully public forever and ever, then khalas, you're evil. All right. Accepting that is accepting a limitation on our liberty that I think is problematic. How does Islam view liberty? The beauty of all this is that Islam came to people who were truly free. Islam was revealed to people who were truly free. Even those who were enslaved amongst them were free. Even those who were enslaved amongst them were free because their minds were free. Even if maybe they didn't have the ability to take care of themselves financially, or they had to work in service of others, but no one told them how to think. And no one told them what they could or could not say, or who they could or could not be. This was a hallmark of Arabian people. As an Arabian man, you would get on your horse, you'd take your sword, and that's it. That's it. You spoke and did what you want. You feared no one, aside from whoever was going to bring a sword and fight you back. But that's it. There was no limitation on what opinions you wanted to have about anything, about absolutely anything. It's because of that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arab to receive this message, because they had nothing else going for them. Honestly, they had nothing else going for them. Aside from the mastery of their own language, there was really nothing else. They were not extremely, they were not well-educated, they were not scientifically advanced, they didn't have an amazing, they had no political governance whatsoever at the time. Their ethics were up and down, and some ethics were extremely problematic, and their understanding of certain things were, but they were free. They were free, they were never conquered. Now, arguably, not for the right reason, but they were never conquered. My understanding of it is that they were not conquered because none of the empires around them thought it was worth conquering them. Because why? It's a desert and it's harb and there's nothing there. Why go through the trouble of trying to organize these people? They have nothing anyways. Just leave them. So they're never conquered. Forget about the reason for it, but they just never were. They lived freely for over a millennia. And for over a millennium, they lived like that. So they were the best group to receive this message, because this message of Islam, you absolutely cannot carry this. You cannot live as a good Muslim if you are not free. Tawheed, I talked about this yesterday and I wanted to leave that, got an extra piece for it today. Tawheed, another thing that it does for you, is that it frees you from the red lines that others will draw. So it's not just the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws the lines and then you accept those lines and you live by them, but no one else gets to draw lines. No one else gets to force you within a box. No one else gets to tell you who you are or what you can and cannot do, aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't mean that you won't follow a law. No, it doesn't mean that you don't come to a land and accept a law, but it means that you are critical of that law. It means that you will speak out against it when you don't think it's acceptable. It means that you will question things and that you will stand up if you think that there is oppression or transgression happening towards you or towards anyone else. That's what this means. So a Muslim, because of Tawheed, is free. He's not enslaved by other people. Not by wealth, because Allah is Razzaq. Not by strength, because Allah is Al-Aziz. Not by the fear of life, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Muhyi wal-Mumit. Because you're a servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who dictates these things. So you're not لا تأخذك في الله لومة لائم. You're not shamed out of being who you are and speaking what you want to speak as a servant of God, as a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this piece of it is actually extremely important for us as Muslims to remember, that we value liberty. We value it very much. And for a Muslim to look at liberty as something that is negative, there's too much hurriya. You've heard this before. I'm sure you've heard this before. I'm sure you've grown up somewhere and someone said, oh no, these countries have too much hurriya, too much free. Too much? What do you mean too much? What, you want less? You want less? You want it to be similar to what you're living right now in the situation that you're in? That's what you want? It's a problem when we look at liberty in a negative way, because some will use it in a chaotic manner, or some will use it for hate speech, or some will use it to offend other people. But what are you better off doing? Limiting liberties that will cause people to lose the ability to actually practice Islam properly, and they lose their integrity, and they can't carry this message, versus accepting liberty with the good and the bad, and then trying to take this concept that has been reduced and resurrect it again, for it to be exactly what it should be. Not only should we accept freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of religion and freedom of behavior, we should also be champions of it. I'm going to end with this for freedom. COVID. COVID is the argument I make when it comes to individual liberties and understanding. COVID is the perfect example. You have the liberty to do whatever you want unless you harm people. Now, I'm pretty sure the guy who was, deep frying his lovely bat, and putting some salsa and preparing himself to have his meal, didn't really think that doing that was going to have, it's his freedom, it's his liberty. I can eat whatever I want. But then you did that, and then you shut down the bloody planet for 2 years. And you sent us into a financial recession that we weren't anticipating, at least for another decade, at least for another 10 years. We're in a position right now not just as a country, but as a globe, as a planet, in a deep financial predicament because of the behavior of a couple of people. Now, I'm not blaming them, by the way, at all. I'm just saying that if you didn't learn from that your behaviors have to be scrutinized under the lens of whether they can cause harm, maybe indirectly in the long run, and that matters, then we're running into problems. We reduced liberty. Just instead of it being reason to question authority, to stand up against oppression, to govern thyself, to express ourselves so that we're not, so we don't end up with dictatorships and we don't end up with actual mazalim, actual persecution, to just, I want to do whatever I want. I get to do whatever I want, and no one gets to tell me what I can and cannot do. That we've reduced it to that, and that's a problem, because now that becomes the emphasis of this value, and that can cause harm. We've seen it cause harm. What happens the next time someone eats something else? What happens, then what? When another super virus comes along and starts, then what do we do? Lock down again? How many times can we actually afford to do these things? And this is just a simple example of a health one. There's so many more. When we talk about social behaviors, how you dress and how you deal with the opposite gender, what you expose and how you, it's my life, it's my body, it's my eyes. I can look whatever I want. I can say, sure, but you're a part of a society. You don't think that your behaviors will affect the larger group as a man and as a woman? It's just, I can do whatever I want. That's no. See, this is the problem. When the emphasis on just individual liberty, and there's no sense of what the collective, what the group actually benefits from, that what you're doing actually harms the group, that actually causes harm to the people around you. It becomes a problem. We're in a difficult situation. The second topic I want to talk about is jihad. To exert, that's what it means. It means to exert effort. I'm not going to take, inshallah, as much time for the next two, but I want you to take time and think about it. Jihad is a word that we have been taught or programmed to be ashamed of, or to say under our breath. If the word comes up, you kind of just whisper it down because you don't want someone else to hear it, because it's been used in a way that is so negative that we don't want to talk about it. Even though Islamically, it's probably one of the most important Islamic concepts that we have. It's extremely, extremely important. Like, it's central within what Islam is. It's 41 times in the Quran. That's a pretty high recurrence for a value. For a value, it's a high recurrence for something that values don't come in the Quran in that degree of frequency. Other toolkits do, and names of Allah, for example, and other acts of worship. But when it comes to values, this is a pretty high one to talk about jihad. And jihad, it means to exert effort. Juhd is your effort. Jahada means you strived against something. You're striving against something. Now, the Prophet ﷺ says, رأس الأمر الإسلام وعموده الصلاة وذروة سنامه الجهاد. The head of this matter is submission of Islam, is submission. And the pillar of it is your connection with Allah, salah. And the pinnacle of it, dhirwatu sinami, the highest point on the hump of the camel, dhirwatu sinam, which is the pinnacle, is jihad, is the concept of jihad fi sabilillah. The problem, obviously, is the common or ongoing confusion of this word or mixing of this word with combat, with being in the battlefield. Now, the word jihad existed way before it was permissible for Muslims to bear arms. In Surah Al-Hajj, on the way to Medina, أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. Now you've given the permission to bear arms. In the verses that would come after that, in Surah An-Nisa, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ يعني فلما كتب عليهم القتال إذا فريق منهم يخشون الناس كخشية الله أو أشد خشية. The Quran had to do a lot of advocacy to get Muslims to prepare themselves that they were going to have to fight. They're going to have to defend themselves. They were going to have to build an army, bear arms, and go into combat. The Muslims didn't want to do that because for 13 years they weren't, and they liked that. They liked the peacefulness that Islam brought to them, and they liked the fact that they were they were civil in comparison to others who were barbaric. But it doesn't mean that you don't. So of course, jihad, a part of it is that. Combat is a part of jihad for sure. But is that what the word actually meant? No, the word when it first existed in the Quran, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. These verses were revealed in Mecca, way before the concept of combat was even acceptable, before bearing arms was even permissible. So this word was used by the Prophet ﷺ at a time when bearing arms was not even an option. Because the concept of jihad was much wider than that. Scholars talk about 14 different categories of jihad, starting with the jihad of your nafs and jihad with the tongue and against sin and regarding doing good deeds, and just goes on. And then the last, or the final one that Ibn Qayyim has in Zad al-Ma'ad, and he has also in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, he talks about the final one, which is jihad with the sword. When you have to actually go in combat. It's one out of 15 different categories, 14 different categories of what striving actually is. But what does jihad do? Jihad is regarding the purpose of your life, the ambitions that you have, the achievements or the activism that you do, the self-purification that you're trying to achieve. That's where jihad is an umbrella concept. If you understand it properly, it makes sure that everything that you're doing in your life, you get ajr for. Everything. Everything, absolutely everything that you're doing will fall under the bigger picture of you striving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So getting up in the morning and going to work, you're getting ajr. Doing your job properly, you get ajr. Taking care of your family, you get ajr. Because it's all forms of mujahada. It's all forms of you working against the challenges in this life to achieve a goal of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the totality or the entirety of your life, the bigger picture of who you are. The umbrella concept for jihad is very rich. It's very important for us to contemplate. So if you look at what it ends up meaning a state that you are constantly in. You're always in this state of mujahada. You're never outside of it. You're always striving against things. When we reduce this beautiful concept that literally allows every aspect of your life to be an act of worship, that puts you in a position where you are constantly assessing your surroundings and working towards a goal and striving against difficulties, reduce that just to combat, which is maybe less than 1% of when it's used, and less than 1% of Muslims have ever actually had to do that. If you think about historically, how many Muslims have had to be in a position where they had to bear arms? Very few. It's very specific points in history, in very specific times, that the majority of Muslims, the Salihin, lived and died and never bore arms, never had to. And then why is it talked about so much? It's talked about a lot, in terms of combat, because it's the ultimate sacrifice. Striving requires sacrifice of your time, of your effort, of your energy, of your passion, of your wealth. You're striving, you're putting all of that forward. The ultimate sacrifice is when you put your life on the line. So the Quran talks about it a bit, and it points it out, because it challenges you. Do you fully accept your status as a mujahid, as someone who is constantly striving? Yes. Well, are you willing to put your life on the line? No. Well, then there's something missing. Then your jihad is not constant. I tell you, values have to be consistent. There can't be an exception to them. You can't say, no, I'll offer everything, but not that. And that doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything then. Then there's some self-serving purpose that you're doing this for. You're not actually doing it for the right reason. But if you're willing to offer your life, then you'll offer everything else that is less valuable. Your wealth is less valuable. Your time is less valuable. Your passion, your energy, your expertise, your knowledge, all that is less valuable than your ruh. So if you're willing to put your ruh on the line, then you'll put everything else on the line. That's why the Quran talks about it, not because the Quran is blood hungry, and that the meaning of jihad is specifically to fight, but because as an example, it serves as the ultimate one. It serves as the ultimate example of striving, where you put the most valuable thing you have on the line for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think that understanding jihad also puts us in a position where we not only accept but also welcome challenges. You see, it's a mindset where you're expecting that life is going to be challenging. You're not walking in with the expectation, oh, expectations ruin so much. Yani, if you understand how expectations work, you live. It's 60% or 70% of how I live my life. It's just if you have the right expectations, you live better. Right? If I go tomorrow to work, in my mind, I'm going to see one consult in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. That's what I'm expecting. I go and I end up seeing 3 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon. That's a bad day. I walk away. I'm physically upset. Physically upset. I don't want to be. If I went in that morning thinking that I'm probably going to see all the consults in the morning, all 4 of them, and probably going to see like 10 in the afternoon, and I end up seeing 3 and 6, I'm happy. Right? See the difference? I'm happy. Same timing, same thing. It's just first day I walked away upset. Second day I walked away happy. It's just about it's all in here. What I was expecting. If you expect a lot from the other person, you're going to be very, 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 very disappointed. Very. You're going to be constantly disappointed and upset, because rarely do people ever live up to your expectations, if ever. Which poses the question: is it worth having high expectations of other people, or should you have high expectations of yourself? Maybe. People ask me, "Oh, Ramadan, how do you do all this?" That's what I expect from myself. Like if I don't do it, I'll actually be, physically upset. I'll be mentally depressed that I didn't do all of this. And shame on me. How could I not? So it's an issue of expectation. If your expectation is 50 minutes of Taraweeh, when we make it 20, you're upset. If you're coming in with 2 hours and I make it an hour and a half, you're happy. Right? It's just an expectation. With time, with training, after a while, now you're okay with it. You're okay with an hour and a half. So if I end up finishing 1 hour, 25 minutes, you walk away, you're like, awesome. That qari was amazing. He finished 5 minutes early. You feel good. Even though maybe the year before, because you weren't. So it's all about what expectations you carry in life. Jihad is a mindset where you're expecting it's going to be difficult. There's going to be challenges. So if a day comes by and there's no challenge, you're like, well, that was nice. It's only one problem today. I didn't have to deal with 100. But you walk into life where, no, I want smooth sailing. Smooth sailing, please. I'm here for the smooth sailing. Where is that line? Can I stand in that line? I'm here for the ease. I don't want any. Then you're going to be very, very disappointed and very frustrated, because it's going to be difficult. Jihad is very important for us. Wallahi, it is. We've lost it. We've reduced it to just combat. And since we're not in combat, we've completely removed the word. We don't think the sheikhs talk about it. We don't really look at the verses as important. But it's a mindset that prepares you to deal with difficulties. And if you live like that, then you'll always be pleasantly surprised when things are a little bit less difficult than you thought they were going to be. You'll always be a little bit happier. And you'll hold yourself to a higher expectation and be more productive. You do more because you're holding yourself to high expectations. You expect nothing from people around you. Try it. Try to expect very little from people around you. That's how you keep friends. Well, that's how you keep friends. That's how you survive doing da'wah. Very little expectations from anyone. You come here, I expect no one to show up. I expect this not to work out. I expect not to be online. Because if I expect it all to be perfect, then the moment there's a problem, I'm going to get upset. Why wasn't the title right? Why wasn't it? Because I was expecting something. Don't expect anything, and you'll be pleasantly surprised the majority of your life. I know it sounds cynical, but it really isn't. If you stop expecting a lot from others and start expecting a lot from yourself, it changes the whole thing. Jihad puts you in that mindset. Look, what's coming, there's going to be a lot of problems. There's going to be difficulties and challenges. You're expecting it, you're ready. You're welcome. Yep, bring it on. Bring it on. That's what I'm ready for. I have all this. I have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on my side. I have my understanding in my deen. I'm ready. So if you run through a day or two or a small patch in your life where it's quiet, it's very pleasant for you. Versus you're constantly worrying about things getting a little bit difficult, and when they get difficult, you lose your ability to function because you weren't expecting it. I hope that this is what I'm talking about. Concepts. We've lost it. We've lost what jihad meant. We don't have it because we reduced it. We accepted it just being combat, and we don't actually have it for what it is, which is extremely helpful for us as Muslims. Education or knowledge. We reduced it to, I'll end with this inshallah, we'll be done in a few minutes. We reduced it to a degree. Just to a degree. It's something you put on the wall. Point people to it. That's what I did. If you have 4 or 5 of them, the more the better. You have them nicely framed, you put them on the wall. People can walk into the room and read them for a few seconds, and you watch them as they do, feeling good. It's reduced to a degree. And it's a problem, wallahi. One of the most knowledgeable people that ever taught me in my life didn't even go to school. One of my teachers memorized Al-Fiyat al-Malik with the sharh by heart. He'd never been to school in his life. He could quote Sharh ibn Aqil on Al-Fiyat al-Malik from his mind, from his head. He could quote word for word. This man knew more Arabic than I've ever met a human being on this planet know Arabic. Never been to school in his life. Reduce it to a degree. It's important. I'm not saying a degree is not important. Like, remember I told you this at the beginning, that I am not saying here that what we're reducing something to is not valuable. Like when we talk about jihad reduced to combat, is combat not important? No, it's the pinnacle. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that we're losing the bulk. I hope this is making any sense to you, because if wallahi, see, I have expectations. If someone puts this out that he's saying this is not important, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, no, I'm not saying that what things are being reduced to are not valuable. I'm just saying that we're losing the bulk of what actually is important, and we're stuck with something that is just a slither of what the actual value and concept once was. So for education, for it to be reduced to just a degree that you put on the wall, is problematic, wallahi. You're going to be very disappointed when you graduate and you don't feel like you know more. You don't feel like you're ready to deal with life. You find out that to learn things, you're going to have to do that on your own. University just give you a tool to know how to look things up. If a patient comes in with a certain type of cancer, I know where to look to figure out what type of chemotherapy or what type of therapies they can get. You don't know how to do that. Not because there's anything wrong with you. You just didn't go through medical school and training in internal medicine and medical oncology. But within your, in law, if something comes up and Ustaz Jahbal doesn't know what to look up, he knows where to find it. I would have no idea even where to begin. I'd have no training in that. But to actually be proficient from a knowledge perspective, to be proficient, you have to do a lot of work on your own. It's the work that you do later. It's the reading it's the personal reading, it's the personal effort that you put. Islam was, wallahi, the tradition of Islamic knowledge was so beautiful. It was oral. Like, you know how you would learn this Islamically. And I try to do this in the academy. It's hard because the number of students, mashallah, is high, and I don't have enough people to help me. But the way this would happen is that if I taught you a matan, the way you would pass the assignment, is you would come, pass the course, is you would come, recite it, and explain it to me, as if I didn't know what it was. Right? And you would prove to me that you understood it by being able to explain it. And if you were stuttering and you weren't able to explain things and define them, and then you would basically say to yourself, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to go back and study this again. You basically do it yourself. You didn't need the teacher to tell you you don't know what you're doing, because you don't have the capacity. That's how it was done. That's how I learned a lot of Matun. I had to sit down and explain. And that's why I learned a little bit how to talk about stuff. I had to sit down and articulate, explain to my teacher as if he was a grade 5 or grade 6 student, usul al-fiqh. And then he would listen, and if that makes sense, he would question me. Well, that doesn't make sense. What does that mean? And if I couldn't answer questions, I got lost. Then go back and study again. These exams are garbage, wallahi. They assess nothing. Exams assess nothing. They get you the degree, but they don't teach you anything. Just so you know, I have written more exams than probably everyone in this room. The number of exams I've written is ridiculous, and I can tell you that you learn almost nothing from exams. They're not a very good assessment tool. Even the OSCEs that you stand up and do, they're not very good assessment tools. Assessment tools, to assess people's knowledge, requires time. It requires ongoing observation, investment in their learning process. Reduced to academics, is knowledge only academics? Is it just those high degrees of law and medicine and engineering? What about the other stuff? Are they not important? Does it have to be an academic degree? Is knowledge nothing else? What about skill sets? Should knowledge be applicable? Is it important for knowledge to be applicable, or does that not matter? Do you ever think about the amount of useless information that you pick up on a daily basis? Just when you're staring at your phone and looking at a social media, the amount of useless information that you learn, stuff that you will never, ever require. You learn something about how snakes mate, or where tigers like to live in the jungle, and who cares? Like, how is that going to explain to me how that's going to affect your life in any form or manner? It's just clutter in the brain. It's just information that your brain does not need to know. You don't have to memorize it. And we've disconnected learning and education from mentorship. This is my pet peeve in life. And we've disconnected learning from mentorship. There's no mentorship anymore. Just here's information. Go. Here's information. Here's how you use it. Here's how it's supposed to affect your character. Watch. This is how you behave with it. This is how you make sure it doesn't go to your head. This is how you make sure you use it for service. This is how it humbles you. This is how it puts you at awe of the universe and of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without that piece, without that interpersonal. It's useless, wallahi. What is the Ministry of Education called in Syria, in the Middle East? You know what it's called? Wizarat what? Tarbiyah. It's called Wizarat al-Tarbiyah. It's called the Ministry of Raising. Raising, not ta'lim. Tarbiyah with ta'lim, and educate. But first is tarbiyah. That's what knowledge is supposed to be. We've disconnected knowledge from mentorship. And now we're suffering. Even in Islam, they come, they memorize, they recite the surah, and they leave. I didn't realize that was the case for a while later, because that's not how I learn, and that's not how I teach. When I have a halaqah, I don't do that. I listen to them, but no, we sit down, we chat. I get to know them, well. I poke, I probe, I bother them, I follow them. So in Syria, we started, when I started the Quran program there, we had 350 students at the end, in a village that only had 3,000 people to begin with, right? So we had almost all of the kids. And I had a deal with both schools, the elementary school and they would send me the report cards of their students to me. The report cards would come to the masjid, like to me. I would pick them up, and I would hold the kids accountable. And there would be an annual day of fala'ah, where all the kids who raise their feet are up, and I would hold, because their parents didn't care. Their parents didn't care if they stayed in school or not. Most of the parents didn't even know their kids were coming to the masjid. Like most of the parents didn't even know that their kid, I remember I watched one time a father come to the masjid because he was asked to bring benzene, like a mazot, diesel. And he found his kid there. And he's like, the kid was Muhammad. I never remember, it was Muhammad Adnan, his name was. His father's name was Adnan as well. So he looks at him, what are you doing here? Why aren't you at home? He's like, I'm at the halaqah. What halaqah? The Quran halaqah. What? Since when are you in a halaqah? He was there for 3 years. Yeah. He memorized 9 juz'. And he's telling us, I know 9 juz'. 9 juz'. You know 9 juz' of the Quran. He didn't know. That was the reality of the time that we were living in. These kids, we have to mentor them, you have to teach them, you have to take them, you have to invest in them as human beings, you have to spend time. We actually made the papers one year. We have a Markaz Thaqafi, Allah Yajzil Khair, brother Samir. He ran it, and he actually did he gathered data for us. I didn't know he was doing it. We went from a 11% retaining of students. When I was in grade 6 or grade 5, there were 2 classes of 30 students in my village and the other village. So altogether, you're talking 60 and 60, 120 students. In grade 10, there was 13 of us from both villages. That's it, 13. 13 out of 120, 13. That's the retaining level. Huh? We were able to take it from 11 or 12% to 47% within 2 years. Within 2 years. That doesn't happen through just sam'a ruh. No, that happens a child, and then you get to know the person. You invest in them a little bit. You actually spend time with them. That's being lost. We're losing that. We don't have that anymore. We're not doing that in our communities. We're not making sure that teachers are actually doing that. This is why we're trying to make some changes. Skill sets are knowledge. Knowing how to present yourself. Walk into a room and Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, and salim ala nas, and my name is Fulan. This is what and knowing at a young age, being able to do that confidently. Not your dad, come in, say salam, and then you run away. Go stand behind the road. That's not cute. It's not cute. If you're a young man, it's not cute. You should be able to walk in, give salam, be very clear on who you are, and state. Manage money. I don't know how to do it. If it wasn't for my wife, I'd be standing outside the masjid after the dars asking for donations for myself. And if my wife didn't take care of I would give the dars and then stand outside in the shad because I don't know how to manage money. I didn't learn. No one taught me. And my dad managed money for me all my life, but I never learned how to manage money. And there's a lot of other stuff. And time management, the number one problem for all the youth that I speak with, time management. Sleep management. They don't know how to sleep. You would think out of all the skill set that comes naturally. Apparently it doesn't. Apparently people don't know how to sleep. They don't know how to go to sleep, when to go to sleep, how long to sleep, how to make sure that they have good sleep hygiene, and wake up in the morning and go do their thing. And to manage their time, where they do this in the morning. Then I scheduled when I was in my 20s, I scheduled bathroom breaks. I scheduled leisure. The time that I had off, I was going to have time. I had fun. I did everything. Oh, I had a lot of fun. I got fun with my friends. We had motorcycles. We'd go. We'd do whatever we wanted. But it was scheduled. It was by schedule. This is when I was going to do it. So when I was doing it, that's it. I wasn't doing anything else. Learned how to. These are skill sets. This is not knowledge. This is knowledge. This is the most important knowledge. What's the point if you know how to subtract and add and divide and you don't know how to run your life? You don't know how to sleep properly and wake up in the morning and do your thing. You don't know how to. What's the point if you don't know how to deal with people? If you don't have the social skills to know how to speak to others and listen to them and interact with them in a positive manner and accept criticism and feedback and offer it in a way that's respectful as well. How do we view human sciences? When we talk about human sciences in this community, everyone has to be a doctor, right? Everyone. Your kids, all of them dakatra, all of them, because that's all that matters. And or muhandisin, or maybe muhami. I remember, the proverb. So what is the future of an Arab kid? Either a doctor, an engineer, or dead. That's it. There's no. We're about human sciences. We have no one, because we did this, because we emphasize. Who am I to speak? And I'm a physician myself, yani. But what about human sciences? What about political sciences? What about arts? Yeah. What about media specialties? Why are these not important? Why are these frowned down upon? Oh, that's all he studied. The poor guy comes to يخطب. What do you do? Oh, I studied political sciences. Well, he's not a doctor. How are we going to? Do you not see the value of this today? Do you not see the problem that we're in because we don't have people in these specialties? Are trades and crafts not considered education? So, are plumbers and welders, are these not people mechanics? Are they not people who are educated? Is this not a valuable piece of knowledge? We have to see, we've reduced knowledge to one thing. It's a degree on the wall that's taken from a university where it's higher education. Everything else is not worthy. It's not important. And that's untrue. And that's wrong. And knowledge is sacred. In Islam, I'll end with this. Islam is lifelong learning. Do I need to preach to you the importance of ilm and talab ilm in Islam? I hope I don't have to. I hope that we've done enough here. Ilm is the most important thing you have as a Muslim. You are commanded to do this all your life. From the moment you're able to understand to the day you die, you continue to learn. You learn everything that is worthy of learning. Everything is worth to learn. You learn it. Whether it's Islamic knowledge, whether it's anyone know the picture in the background here? Anyone have an idea what we're looking at? No, it's close though. No. Qarawiyyin, right? That's Fatima al-Fihriya there. The first university ever was built by a woman by the name of Fatima al-Fihriya within Tunis. It was called Jami' al-Qarawiyyin because it took in the people from Qayrawan, the known city. It took in, till this day it works. Till this day it still happens. And as a university that was started in the 3rd Islamic century, the 9th century in terms of 2024, the 9th century, it taught medicine. It was a degree in medicine. They gave degrees in medicine and degrees in Sharia. It's the earliest, in the Guinness Book of World Records, it's the earliest university to offer a degree in sciences. Yeah. That's how we view knowledge as Muslims. We view it as something that is beautiful, that is wide, that everyone has something to offer, everyone is knowledgeable within what they know how to do. We should value that knowledge, we should respect that knowledge, and we should deal with it in an appropriate way. And I hope that was a benefit to you. And with that, subhanahu wa ta'ala, bihamdik, la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam.